Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. We are doing something a little bit different today. I'm going to be sharing a tutorial, a beginner-friendly sewing tutorial that you can use to make all of the men in your life or yourself historical style fantasy tunics, shirts, tops, just your typical drop shoulder, billowy sleeves, romantic fantasy menswear. That's what we're gonna do today. See, the thing is, I am in a ballet performance. It's one of the hobbies I do that I don't really talk about online, but yeah, I'm in a performance very soon, and I offered to make my partner, my dance partner, a costume. And I thought, this is the perfect opportunity to make some menswear together. It's gonna be super simple. We're mostly gonna use rectangles. There's no pattern. We're only gonna use a couple of measurements. I'm gonna be using this cotton. This is an off-white, kind of like cream colored cotton that has a little bit of a rougher texture, like kind of reminiscent of linen. So yeah, let's head to the cutting table and get started straight away. Before we start cutting out our pattern pieces, we're gonna need several measurements from the model. So the first one we need is from shoulder to shoulder. Then we need shoulder to wrist, or to the desired length of your sleeve. We need nape of the neck to the complete length of the finished garment that you want. We need around the armpits to make sure that we leave enough space there. And we need a wrist measurement. Be sure to leave a little bit of room here as well. You want the garment to be comfortable. And then we need a waist circumference, just to make sure that that garment will fit in the end. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut my fabric to the right length. The right length being the measurement we just took for how long you want the garment to be, plus a little bit of hem allowance. I went for 5 centimeters at the bottom here, just so that we can finish the bottom off nicely in the end. So that complete length of the measurement we took in the back, plus a couple centimeters for hem allowance, is going to be the finished length of the garment. So I'm just cutting across the entire width of my fabric to that length, and I have my fabric folded in half here so that I'm creating 2 panels at the same time. And the next cut I'm gonna make is gonna determine the width of my garment. So for this, you're gonna have to determine the width of your finished garment. Now, I want to make this with a droopy shoulder, so I decided to add 10 centimeters to each side of the shoulder. That means adding 20 centimeters total to the shoulder measurement that we just took. The width of your garment should be whichever is wider out of these 2 options, either the shoulders plus 15 or 20 centimeters, or half of the waist circumference plus 5 centimeters. In my case specifically, the shoulder measurements plus 20 centimeters is wider than the waist circumference, so that's the measurement I'm going to go with. You want to determine this in order to make sure that the garment will fit around both the waist and the shoulders. Go ahead, add your seam allowance to that, and then cut your fabric to the desired width. Next, we're going to create a neckline. I like to do this through both layers of fabric, so the front and the back, just so that I'm sure that the neckline on the front and back match up. But we are going to create the back neckline first, as that one is generally a little bit narrower than the neckline in the front. So go ahead, fold your fabric in half, then draw out this moon shape, starting from about 17 centimeters out from the fold. When in doubt, go smaller rather than bigger, as you can always cut out more from the neckline, but it's really hard to add on if you have taken away too much. So when you've cut that out, your garment should look like this, and the next thing you want to do is sew up the shoulder seam. So you want to close up the top of your garment, except for that neckline that we just cut out, which obviously needs to remain open for your head to go through. Once you've sewn that up, make sure to press your seams. Just a little note here, I am using French seams throughout this entire project. It's a technique that you can use to make cleaner finishes. If you're not ready for that, by all means, just do normal seams. You'll be absolutely fine with those as well. All right, time to make the sleeves. Now, for the sleeves, you again need to determine how wide and how long they need to be. For the length, we've just taken that measurement from shoulder to wrist. That's going to be the length of your garment, but do remember, if you've added a little bit of shoulder droop, to subtract anything you've added on the top from the bottom, so that you don't end up with a sleeve that is too long. So I added 10 centimeters at the shoulder, so I'm going to subtract 10 centimeters from my total arm measurement to determine the length of my sleeve. But I am going to make sure to leave a little bit of room at the bottom for hem allowance, or in this case, I'm going to create a channel that I'm going to thread an elastic through. So we want to add a little bit more there. So in total, I'm gonna subtract about 5 centimeters, and that's gonna be the length of my sleeve. For the width of the sleeve, I like my sleeve to end at about 1/3 of the finished garment to create a really big, loose oversized billowy sleeve. So in the end I ended up with square pieces for my sleeves of 60 by 60 centimeters, which would be 30 folded in half. When your sleeves are cut out, we're gonna go ahead and attach them to the bodice straight away. So I just folded my sleeves in half, pinched them a little bit to determine where the center is, and I'm gonna make sure to match up that center to my shoulder seam that I already had. And then you're gonna want to sew along the entire width or the entire length of the sleeve that you have here. So it's really simple and straightforward. And once you've done that on both sides, your garment should look a little something like this. Looks kind of funny right now, but once I lift this up and fold it in half, you will start to see the beginnings of a shirt-like shape. So the next thing we're going to do is sew up the side seams here. So you're going to want to sew the bottom of the sleeve and the side of the bodice, or like the main shirt. I don't think you call this a bodice in menswear, but anyways, you can choose to make this one long seam all the way over, or make two separate seams, one of the sleeve and one of the sides, and join them up in the middle. Whichever is easiest for you and whichever you prefer, they're both fine. Little progress, this is where we're at. So next I'm gonna work on the bottoms of the sleeves. So I'm gonna make a channel here for an elastic to go through, and the way I'm gonna do this is fold over 1.5 centimeters on the bottom, press this, and then fold over again so that I create a little channel. And both times I'm gonna go ahead and press this just to make sure that it really stays in this shape and looks nice and neat in the end. So once that is done on both sleeves, I'm gonna go ahead and top stitch along the outer edge of that fold that I created, so that we have made a little channel. Alright, so then it's time to take a little bit of elastic, and for this I'm going to use that wrist measurement that I just took, or in this case specifically I'm just measuring it on myself because I forgot to take this measurement on my actual model. Just leave a little bit of room around the wrist. It doesn't have to be very tight. We just want this to kind of scrunch in the bottom of that sleeve and create a nice bell sleeve shape. So I'm gonna attach a safety pin to the end of my elastic and use that to thread through the channel that we just created. Oh, very important, sorry I forgot to mention that, is to leave a little bit of space on the bottom of your channel when you're sewing it shut for your safety pin to thread through, of course. So once it pops out on the other side and you've scrunched it all around, you can just go ahead and sew these elastics together, the two ends of the elastic, and that should leave you with an elasticated bottom of your sleeve, which looks really nice and helps completely sell the look that we're going for. Okay, so moving on to the bottom of the garment, I'm gonna go ahead and just hem that, which is a really simple process. But again, I'm gonna need to press here. So I'm gonna first press over a little edge of just 1 centimeter. I'm gonna go all around, and then I'm gonna press again 3 centimeters over. So in total, I'm gonna take away 4 centimeters of the bottom. It's gonna look a little something like this, and for the hem you always want your allowance to be a little bit bigger, it just looks nicer in the finished result. So once again I'm top stitching over the edge of that fold that I have, and there's the bottom done. So last thing we need to work on is the neckline. So as I mentioned, we already finished the back of the neckline, we need to do the front now. So to determine the center of my front here, I'm gonna put the shoulder seams together so that I have the back of the garment out of the way and just the front here. And then I'm gonna just cut a little bit more off here, making sure to always end at my shoulder seam so that I don't cut into my shoulder seam, but just to create a little bit more room in the front of the neckline, because generally you want that. Just going back however many times I feel that it is necessary to create enough room for the head to go through. And also to aid with that, I'm gonna create a little slit exactly down the center of the front, just a couple centimeters here, which is again gonna make the garment a little bit easier to put on. So we need to finish off this slit nicely so that it doesn't come undone, obviously. So I'm just gonna fold this back as tinily as I can. Tinily is not a word. I'm gonna fold back as thin of a strip of fabric as I possibly can. Gonna do that twice again and press as I go to create a very thin rolled hem is what this is called. So once I've pressed that, we're going to sew through that. And another thing I'm going to sew is just along the bottom of that slit, like where my cut finishes. I'm going to sew back and forth a couple of times, and this is going to stop that from ripping open, because this is quite a vulnerable point in your garment and you don't want this obviously to just rip down the front, center front completely. This is going to really help to prevent that, stop that from happening. So a little safety measure you definitely want to take here. Okay, so next up I'm going to create some bias tape. You can't see what I'm doing here really well, sorry about that, but I cut out a strip of fabric that is 3 centimeters wide, and preferably you want to cut this on the bias, which means diagonally across the grain of your fabric. So what I'm going to do is fold both sides of this towards the center and then press it, and that creates a tape, a bias tape, that I'm then going to use to bind the neckline. So I'm going to align the center of the bias tape that I just created to the center back of the garment, pin it along the edge of the neckline until I come to the end, which is where my slit is, and then the rest of this tape is going to create my ties in the end, my neck ties. So I'm just going to pin that on both ends. And here you can see what the bias tape looks like a little bit better. So you want to open that up and line up the raw edges when you go to do this. And then you're going to sew through that fold, like through the pressed edge of the bias tape, all along the top of your neckline. So when you've done that, it looks a little something like this. You can already see how it has cleaned up the edge, but we still need to finish the inside. So in order to do that, I'm going to go back to the ironing board. I'm going to just press this in half, making sure to tuck in that edge that we have already pressed before. So you want to close the bias tape back up and then fold it in half. And then we're going to go back to the sewing machine and sew up everything, which includes the neckline and the ties that we have now created by folding this bias tape in half. And when you finish sewing your ties, it should look a little something like this, and your man's tunic, shirt, top, thing, fantasy top is finished. It is meant to be worn with some type of belt or something around the waist or the hips. That way you can kind of make it hang over that as well, and it gives just more of this voluminous look all around. I'm just wearing it over my chest here, but you get the idea. This is what it looks like. Because it's made up of all rectangles, it is really easy to sew. You only need to sew straight stitches. Not many very complicated techniques in here, and it does give a really nice finish. As you can see, the top here with the ties, it's a very clean look. There are no exposed seams anywhere. I did French seams on the whole thing, as I mentioned, so I don't have any exposed edges anywhere. Like, all my seams are clean. Here obviously they are inside these ties. The bottom is nicely hemmed, and then along the top and the back here you have this bias binding, which then comes down into these ties, and you can wear it open like this, or you could close it up like that. The dropped shoulder and the oversizedness of this helps with the range of motion in the arms. If you were to make it narrower, then you would have to do something to accommodate for kind of arm movements, because if it's tight and you want to raise your arm, you're not going to be able to do that with just this shape of garment that is just rectangles attached to each other. So in that case you will need a little bit of extra fabric in the armpits here to account for movement like that. But since this is oversized and it has that drop shoulder, there is a lot of room there, and you can move your arms in all directions, which is important since this is a dancing costume. I hope this was helpful for you guys as well, so now you can make the men in your life, or again yourself, a nice shirt like this as well. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial and found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to give a thumbs up and potentially subscribe to my channel to see lots of other sewing videos that I do. If you would like to support me through Patreon, there is a link in the description box below. Thank you so much for your support. There is another video here that I think you might also enjoy. You can go watch next. Thank you so much for watching once again, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye!